Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me clearly, or is it buzzy kind of? It's good? Okay. So by the grace of God, I've been clean and sober since January 6th of 1987, back when you can say clean and sober. And for that, I'm truly grateful. I got sober when I was almost 24 years old, and I am 58 years old now. So it's been quite a journey. I tend to talk fast, and I'm probably going to do that. I'm from New York, and I've got a lot of years to cover. And I always pray God in before I speak, because God is truly the reason we're here. Many of us would not be alive without that. So I'll jump right into it. And my hope is that He transmit to your heart what He needs you to hear. A lot of times people say to me, thank you for sharing. You said right what I needed, but I don't really do that. I just go and He handles what I'm going to say. A lot of times it's the same thing as last time with new information for someone that needs it. So I grew up in an alcoholic family. I'm from New York. I grew up in Long Island, New York, not the city, but more by the ocean. And I have two sisters, one older than me and one younger than me. And I, from the time I was really small, I believed in God. I believed I had done something in a past life, like maybe I was a witch or something, and that's why He was so angry at me for putting me with this crazy family. So my dad was physically abusive on me and sexually abusive on my older sister, and my little sister hid out a lot because she was scared of what was going on with us. And my mom took a lot of prescription pills to shut out my dad. And since I've been clean and sober, a therapist once asked me, like, when did you become suicidal? And when she said that, I had never really thought about it. I didn't become suicidal. I arrived here wanting to leave. So I had always been suicidal. It wasn't like an onset of anything. And I failed to bond to humans as a child because the humans that I had in my life, I clearly couldn't trust, the ones I was supposed to be able to. So the only thing I ever bonded to was my dog. I had a pug that I bonded to. And my father was an airline pilot, which should make you feel safe if you're traveling. I'm traveling in about 18 hours because he was drinking all the time. And as a kid, I thought, what are you going to hit? Like a cloud? Like, what's up there? Now I realize there's other planes up there. It took me a while to get that one. And there's also the whole takeoff landing thing's pretty intense. But luckily, I wasn't thinking about all that as a child. So the good news about him being a pilot is that he would leave for a couple of days and then he'd come back. So we'd have little reprieves from my dad. And because of my dad's violence on me, I was violent on others. My first act of violence that I clearly remember was like in nursery school. I pushed some kid down a flight of stairs because she looked stupid. And she was hyperventilating so bad she couldn't point me out. And I don't remember feeling any guilt. As a matter of fact, I was glad she couldn't talk or point me out, and I hid in the crowd. And things just went downhill from there. I was always in trouble. I started hitchhiking at a young age, stealing at a young age, smoking, just cigarettes really when I was really young. And my first drink I can't track because I'm a Jew, and it was definitely grape Concord Manischewitz wine. Don't know when it happened, probably when I was really little at a bat mitzvah. Anyway, so that's how we roll. I can't track that one, but yeah, I was always in trouble. Anything that would give me a jolt. I like scary movies. We had this old rickety train down the street from my house. I used to, bridge, and a train would go through it. And I used to sit on the bridge when the train would come by, hoping that it would fall or something, anything for a jolt. And I think I just wanted, I wanted some kind of power control in my life that I couldn't get in my home. So I would look for it in external forces. And when I was like, and I got to say, my dad was doing something with my older sister, but I never saw it. I just knew that he seemed to like my older sister, and he didn't seem to like my mom. And when he'd come home from trips from the airline, he'd bring presents for my sister and not my mom. And my sister was in a different part of the house. So being an abused child, I was tracking everything. And about the age of 13, right after my bat mitzvah, my mom had enough of my dad. And I say that for a reason, because that's supposed to be the time you merge with God, right? As a Jewish kid. So right after that, my mom had enough of my dad, and she left New York and came to California, and with a message that she would come back to us when she settled in and rescue us. But my mom didn't have control of any money. My dad controlled all the money. He had all the power in the house. So she escaped. And when she left, I didn't know if she was really coming back. And frankly, I was thinking more like, I'm glad she got out, because he was abusive to her as well. My dad, before that, I didn't see his drinking that much. I just thought he was crazy. But after that, it started to appear. And my dad always had a gun. I never thought as a kid, like, why does that airline pilot need a gun? I just figured they do, because the gun was always there, and he slept with it under his pillow. And he was very, kind of threatening with that gun. So my mom leaves, and now my dad's trying to find babysitters for us when he goes out on his trips, and he's having a very hard time with it. Sometimes he leaves someone, and sometimes he just goes and we stay alone. And I think in those days there was a thing called latchkey kids. A lot of kids left home alone. It wasn't really child abuse so much back then. And one time he went on a trip and he left us alone, and I figured he'll be gone for like 2 or 3 days, and we could just do whatever. So my sisters were both out. They went to their friend's house. So I had a friend spend the night, my friend Jeanette, and I said, in the morning, we're going to hitchhike to McDonald's. We're going to smoke. This is what you do in New York. Well, kids still hang out by fast food. I don't know what that is, but that's a thing, like ET home. Anyway, we were going to hang out by McDonald's, smoke some cigarettes, get some French fries, maybe get in a fight, because it's New York. That happened a lot. And so she spends the night, and in the morning we start getting ready to go out, and we take a shower, and we can't find the blow dryers to blow dry our hair, which if you're a chick, you do not go out if you can't fix your hair. So we're looking everywhere in the house, and we can't find them. And they're usually like right in the bathroom underneath. And then all of a sudden I hear the garage door open. And at the age of 13, I'm like a skilled war veteran in regards to where my dad is in the house at all times, because over the years I got really, like, I could tell by the pace of his footsteps if he's angry. Because I was abused, right? So I know it's my dad. He's home. We're not expecting him home. So I tell Jeanette, my dad's home. She's like, should I leave? I'm like, no, go in my room. And I go in the bathroom to start to clean up, because I don't want to get in trouble for anything, right? And I hear the bathroom door's almost closed. I hear him come up down the hall, go into his bedroom and set his stuff down. And he kept change in his pilot cap. So I always heard it hit the bench. And I heard him in his room, and then it went silent. And then all of a sudden, the bathroom door banged open, and he had the blow dryer in his hand. He started beating me with it. And I was in between the toilet and the wall trying to get cover. So I went down in between the toilet and the wall, kind of trying to get cover from him. And he started hitting the wall, and plaster started flying out. And then Jeanette came running from the other room because she heard all this noise. And she went to the door and made like a sound. And when she did that, he turned around and she saw him and he saw her. And an equally resonant shock for 2 completely different reasons. She's like, oh my God, she had no idea what goes on in my house. And my dad's like, holy crap, someone sees what he's really like. Because my dad was really well respected in the community. So my dad goes into his bedroom, probably not knowing what to do next. And she goes into the kitchen and calls her mom and says, Laurie needs help. So her mom comes and picks us up from the house, takes us back to her house. And her mom and dad are talking to me about, like, this isn't okay, what's happening to you, blah, blah, blah. And they were going to help me. But then my dad called up over there and he said, what do you know about Laurie? I mean, Laurie's suicidal. She sees psychiatrists regularly. This is all true. Okay, my dad and mom used to take me all around to get on medication, because better to say something's wrong with Laurie than something's bad is going on in this family, right? So a lot of denial there. So she's suicidal. She's seeing a psychiatrist. She's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She's on medication for schizophrenia right now. She lies a lot. She's been kicked out of school. So I think her parents were like, whoa, this is way more than we knew about. We can't get involved in all this. Your dad's coming to get you. So he came to get me, and they let me leave with him. He didn't say anything on the drive home. And then when we got out of the car and up to the front door, he held the door open kind of politely for me. And I thought maybe he had thought about what he did, but instead he was just trying to get me in a spot so he could hit me. And he punched me in the back and I hit the floor. And I think I got enough whatever from those parents to get out. And I ran out for the first time in my life and hid in the bushes till he stopped looking for me. And then I hitchhiked over to my friend Erin's house. And Erin was like a latchkey kid whose parents she only had a mom, but I never saw her. She was never home. And she had a hippie brother and they smoked a lot of weed. So I thought I could crash over Erin's house, no problem. So I get to Erin's house and I call home and he answers the phone. And I said, I'm at Erin's and I'm not coming home. And I hang up real quick. And I think about that now and it's like, wow, you just told them where you were at after all that. But I think at the age of 13, I was in the habit of doing that. So in the middle of the night that night at Erin's house, I get a call from an aunt of mine. She said, the police are at the house. We know you have your father's gun and we're coming to get you. Now, I didn't have my dad's gun. I just told you guys what happened, but the police are at the house. It's the middle of the night and they're coming to get me. And she does. And I get back to the house and my dad's sitting at the kitchen table with a bunch of police officers. And my dad's giving me a look like, if you have a dad like mine, you know the look. The look is like, if you say anything right now, when these guys leave, you and me are going to be alone. So I'm not saying anything about what happened the night before. They just keep on asking me about the gun. And I'm telling them I don't know about the gun. And after a while, the police get tired of questioning me and tell me to go to bed. And then I see them leave out the window. And then my aunt comes into my bedroom and says, you know what, Laurie, I just saw your dad and your sister, my older sister that he was doing things to, sneak the gun out of the oven after the police left. And now I know they were trying to do something bad to set you up. But if you tell on your dad, where are you guys going to go? Like an orphanage? You got no one right now. And he'll lose his job and, you know, it'll just be bad. So I started thinking about it and I thought, you know what? And it wasn't about all that. It was about my little sister. I didn't want my little sister going to an orphanage or anything, but I also didn't want my dad to hate me. I'd always hoped that he would love me. And I knew if I told on him, he'd always hate me. So I told her I'm not going to tell on him. And in the morning, I finally fell asleep. In the morning, I was woken up by a different police officer who walked me out of the house and into a police car, and we started to drive. And I didn't know what this was. Was this Jeanette's parents rescuing me or something else? And when we pulled up to the dark gates of Central Islip Mental Institution, and I saw the big building with the bars on the windows, and I started to hear this man on the walkie-talkie checking me in, I was like, oh my God, Laurie, you should have told someone. Like, you should have told someone last night when you were with the police, because like to bring it up now just wouldn't even seem like you're telling the truth. So I don't say anything, and he turns me over to the guard. Central Islip Pilgrim State in Kings Park is what they wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest after. It was an adult place. They had stopped doing lobotomies, but they were still doing a lot of shock treatment. So anyway, I go in this place, and on the heels of my bat mitzvah, which should have been a spiritual time, it was I was convinced that I was a witch in a past life. It was like God was saying, sentence the witch to hell. And because of my suicidal tendencies, they put me in a solitary room in a straitjacket, and they tied the arms of the straitjacket around the bed. And for me, it was the opposite of a spiritual awakening. It was the spiritual deadening that would rule my life for the next 10 years, right? So my mom keeps on calling back to the house to see how I'm doing, and they keep on saying, Laurie's not here. She's outside playing. You missed her again. And finally, after months, she realized Laurie's not there. She knows how crazy my dad is. She hasn't talked to me. So she hires someone who says there was a juvenile admitted to a mental institution. Let's find out if it's Laurie. And of course they find out it was me, but she doesn't have enough money to get me out here to California, which is where I live now. So she gets me sent to a group home in Stony Brook, New York. And that was where I met you people for the first time, like little you guys. They weren't sober yet. They were a lot shorter and they were a lot of trouble, but I love these kids, right? So immediately it was like I had this family that I bonded to. I love these kids. They taught me to steal better. I had been stealing at the Five and Dime. They taught me how to mug old ladies down by the train station. Feel really bad right now about the old ladies, but it was all we could handle as little kids at the time. We would just take their purses and run. But anyway, I stayed there for a while, and then my mom got enough money to get me back here out here to California. And I didn't want to leave these kids, but I had to. So I moved into my mom's house with my sisters. And I had some major issues with my older sister at that point, as you can imagine, with the gun hiding. So I had all these issues going on. And my mom's message to me as soon as I arrived was, let's put it all behind us. Let's not talk about it anymore. It's going to upset your little sister. So as much as I didn't want to upset my little sister, I needed to talk about it. And instead, I just shoved it down and kept on going. And I started school, but I was scared to go to class. I didn't look like the other kids. There was a lot of dressed up girls, and they looked more grown up. And because I was fighting all the time in New York, I dressed like a boy. I acted like a boy. I had steel toes in my boots. You know what I mean? It was just like not a fit. So I didn't go to class. I ended up hanging out at the smoke pit every day with some other girls that never went to class. And then one day we started doing burglaries to just kill some time. We broke into a house of someone they knew, took some stuff. And then we decided everyone's gone all day, and we started burglarizing all kinds of houses. And before we knew it, we got arrested for $92,000 worth of burglaries. So I became a ward of the court, and the rest of my juvenile years were juvenile hall and group homes. And group home, yeah, it's like higher level than a foster home because they don't find you suitable for a family. And I didn't like the group home, so I ran from everywhere I went to, and I spent most of my times in juvenile hall. And I mastered juvenile hall. I got honor roll in juvenile hall, like I mopped the hallways and stuff and got to stay out late. But at this one point, a bunch of us from juvie moved into a new group home together, and I stayed for a minute. And at that point, they put me to continuation school. And it was at continuation school that I realized, oh my God, this is great, the whole continuation school thing, because the whole school is like a smoke pit. You just show up and you're nice and they give you good grades. And I was sitting there one day at the continuation school, and this old jalopy pulled in and blasting Janis Joplin, and this beautiful girl gets out. And I remember just thinking, I've got to know this girl. So I had tried cocaine before, and it made me talk a lot. I already talk a lot. I don't need any more talk. But I thought, you know what? She might like cocaine. It's expensive, and we're in a really deprived kind of school. I don't think she can afford it. So I went down to the beach, got some cocaine, brought it in the next day, and asked her if she wanted it. She pulled me into the bathroom, pulled me into the stall, and pulled out a needle and a spoon. And the next thing you know, I'm like all in, because I thought, what the hell? If I kill myself, fine. I've been trying to kill myself unsuccessfully for a while. And if I don't, I might like it. So we start shooting up coke and cannabinol on a regular basis. Yeah. So I am so tore up from the floor up by the time I'm 18. I think when I get off probation and they release me from this juvenile detention system, I am going to go back to New York, where I grew up, and people didn't shoot up. I'm sure there are people that shoot up in New York, but this is how young I was. So I turned 18. I went back to New York, and I didn't shoot up because I didn't know anyone that shoots up. And when I was there, I was seeing some guy, and all of a sudden I realized I'm pregnant. There was never a bump on my stomach. I was skinny as a rail, and I'm seeing this guy, and I look down, and it's really obvious that I'm pregnant. And I'm like, oh my God, Laurie, you're pregnant. Like, you could have a family that loves you, like someone that you love. And I start thinking about my family, and I'm like, I got to do this right. I can't let this guy know I'm pregnant, or he's going to take my baby away when he finds out I'm a junkie. So I head back to California pregnant. My mom won't let me stay there. So I move in with some lady taking care of her kids while she goes to work. She had like 5 kids, and the agreement was I could stay there for free if I took care of her kids. And then I got on welfare. My welfare check was like $200 every 2 weeks. And I hadn't been shooting up. Like, I'd still drink a beer every now and then. I thought the weed's good for the baby. I mean, you know how we think. Smoke a joint once in a while, but I'm not shooting up. That's the good news. I'm 6 months pregnant, and a friend of mine shows up, finds out where I'm staying, and brings a needle and a bindle. And without the program or God, I lose the ability to make a choice. So I stick that needle in my arm, and my baby stops moving, and I start calling the hospital, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm shooting up. I know I actually said I have a friend that's shooting up, and her baby stopped moving, and they were like, bring her to the hospital. And I was like, no, I can't. So the next thing I know, I am shooting up through my whole pregnancy. The lady kicks me out of that place. I give birth to my daughter. They don't check her. They send her back with me. Now I'm living in a motel, and I'm using all my welfare money up in one day. And I don't have anything for the baby. And my older sister, my little sister both turned out to be drug addicts. My older sister was like a DJ at a disco, and she hung out with a lot of rich guys. And my little sister was like a punk rocker. And of course, I hung out with a lot of bikers and guys that spent time in prison. So we were all completely different. But one night, my older sister calls me, and she said, Laurie, I was supposed to do a job tonight with this rich guy, and I can't do it. But if you want to do it, he's really nice, and he'll give you a lot of money. So I agreed. Yes, I will do this thing, whatever it is, because there's a lot of money, and my sister knows this guy. So she sends a car over, and they take me to this resort up by where we live, like a restaurant. And then the guy gives me keys to a Mercedes that goes to that I'm supposed to take to the resort. And he said, I have 3 friends waiting for you at the resort. Just go in the room, wait for them, and then come back, smoke some opium with me, and I'll send you home. So I'm thinking, God, this doesn't sound that bad. So I go to that room, and I wait, and 3 doctors come in one by one, and they talk to me about prostitution and AIDS. I guess they thought I was a prostitute. And none of them wanted to be with me. They just told me to straighten up my life, and then they left, and they left a wad of money on the table. And when I looked at the wad of the money that was sitting on the table, it was like $700. And I'm like, $700? That's like 2 months worth of welfare checks for me. for $700, I'm not a prostitute, but I would have done something. You know what I mean? Get that money, right? So the next day, I go back to my motel room and I open the drawer, and it's like a crossroads for me. There's the Bible, like, are you going to pray about it? And there's the yellow pages, are you going to do what you were thinking about doing, which is become a prostitute? I look up prostitution immediately. It's not in the yellow pages, but I find some escort thing, and I sign up. They're like, it's like the 80s at that point, and late 70s, early 80s. And so I fax them a picture of my driver's license, and they say, you're in, right? So they call me that first night, and they're like, we have a job for you. It's in the south area of where we live, and we need you to be there within an hour. And I don't have a car, so I call my little sister at my mom's house. I'm like, get mom's car. You need to drive me somewhere. I'll split the money with you. We'll get high. So she picks me up in my mom's car and drives me to this house. And it's Christmas time. A lot of stuff happens to me around Christmas time. It's one of those other secrets that God will one day tell me about. It's Christmas time. Every house is lit with trees and lights, except for the one I'm about to go into. And I told my sister, if I don't come out, you better call someone. You better help me. So I go up to the door of this house and I knock, and there's like a big whooshing sound. And the door flies open, and there's an old man with crazy Albert Einstein-like hair in a wheelchair. And he's like yelling at me, get in the house. So I go in the house, and let's just say within like under 5 minutes, I'm so rigid and unsexual that he throws me out. I failed prostitution. Like, the good news is he gave me the money, right? So he tells me to get the hell out. He couldn't believe it, and sends me on my way. So I take the money, and I continue to do this, and I get better at it, because you know how we are. We don't fail. And failing prostitution is a whole nother level of, yeah. Anyway, so I keep on going to men's houses and hotels and sleeping them with them for money. But at some point, one of my prison-bound friends said, you should try doing heroin. It's a lot cooler than that cocaine that makes you paranoid. So I started doing heroin to get off of coke, like a detox savings plan. Get off the coke, save some money, because I would normally go to sleep on heroin, so I wouldn't need that much. And that was about the same time that I walked out onto the streets of Harbor Boulevard, and I could not get high enough or well enough to keep it going. And my mom came and took my daughter away at that time. And that was a good thing, because she was spending all day in the motel room with a bunch of guys that I was friends with, even though I trust those guys. While I was working the streets, it wasn't a good place for a baby. But I remember in the beginning of working the streets, it felt so powerful. And that was God, the absence of God in me. And you know how my head lies to me when I'm using it. Said, you're free, you don't have to work, and you can make as much money as you want. But I was selling my soul. But it took a while for that to expose itself. So on the street in the beginning, it felt powerful. But I remember it was November 1986, around Thanksgiving time, and some man pulled a knife on me. And I had been raped, beaten, kidnapped so many times by this point. I just looked at him and I said, you want to rape me? Go. You know how many times I've been raped? And this guy was so scared, he left. He didn't want to touch me. He couldn't imagine someone that didn't care about themselves. It was like a couple months later. It was January 5th, 1987. I was on 5th and Harbor, where I normally work the streets, and this white car pulls up, and I get in the back seat, and it's two guys in the front seat. And they start to drive, and they sped onto the freeway. And at this point, I know getting on the freeway is really bad. You should never get on the freeway. And I had been in so many bad situations that I thought immediately, Laurie, you've got to get out of this car or you might die, right? So I'm in the back seat of this car, and I could see the driver's eyes in the mirror. He looked crazy, like he was high on meth and trying to get somewhere fast. The other guy zoned out. So I jump out of the back seat and into the front to try and grab the steering wheel to make them crash. But they saw me and hit me in the head. And the next thing I know, we're in a clearing in the woods somewhere, and I'm getting raped and beaten, and I have a gun to my head, and I'm in the backseat of that car. And all of a sudden I realize, you know what, Laurie? They don't realize who they have here. They want to kill you. You want to die. Please get them to kill you. So I started screaming at the top of my lungs, because in my mind, I had waited so long to die at this point. And if I didn't die soon, I was just going to continue to get raped and beaten. And I wanted all those bad memories to go away. So I started screaming, kill me, like in this canyon, so loud that they would just pull the trigger and I would be dead. Instead, they got scared and left me for dead. And the next thing I know, I'm being picked up. I guess I was unconscious, and I'm being picked up by this huge person, and I'm being pulled towards a van. And immediately I start fighting this person and saying, because I'm just waking up, At this point, I have blood all over me. I just have a shirt on, that the rest of my clothes are back in the car, and I could tell it's a man. And the first thing that goes through my mind is he's going to beat me up, and I cannot take getting beat up one more time. So I start struggling. Please put me down, please. I don't need your help. I'm going to be okay. And this man picks me up to his eyes, and he's like this huge African-American man, like in the Green Mile. He's just this amazing man. He looks at me and he has tears running down his face. And he said, please, would you please just let me help you? Please let me get you to a hospital. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to pick you up. I'm going to take you to the hospital, and then I'm going to leave. And for that was the first time in my entire life that I would trust someone enough to let them help me, because I always thought, if you help me, I owe you, and I don't owe anybody anything. So this man takes me to the hospital. He must have paid for a cab back, because the cab said, where do you want to go? And the only place I knew was Fifth and Harbor, where I worked the streets. It's the only place I had to go. So in that hospital gown with the slit up the back and nothing on but these little booties and that thing from the hospital, I stick my thumb out and turn a trick. And then after that, I call my mom and I said, Mom, I need help. And she hung up on me, and rightly so. I've done a lot of bad stuff to my mom. And then I called that trick, the guy in the wheelchair. The guy that I failed prostitution with had been connecting with me after he kicked me out of his house that day, on the streets, looking for me, trying to save my life, trying to get me to go to rehab. Somehow he saw that I was just a kid at that point when I showed up to his house. And he somehow, through saving me, he thought he would save himself, because he was an abused kid. I learned about him over time. He was an abused kid that left home when he was 14 and ran the streets with his friends, and then joined the NOM. And when he was leading his battalion, he got shot with shrapnel and ended up in a wheelchair, disabled. And he was alone in that house and calling prostitutes. So he didn't have to be alone anymore. So he had been on a mission to save me. So I called him and I said, Tom, I need help. And he said, Laurie, I will take you wherever you want to go, but I'm not giving you one more dime. So I agreed with him, and he picked me up and he took me to a little detox down by where I live. And I remember going into this little place, and they were like, Laurie, go into your room and rest for a while, and we're going to have a group later on. And I go into this little room, and it was so beautiful, and everything matched, and it was pretty, and the bedspreads were pretty, and I collapsed on the floor because I didn't even feel worthy of sitting on one of these beautiful beds. I was so dirty inside and out as far as my mind went. So I hit the floor, and for the first time in a long time, I was like in a praying like position, and I said, God, please help me. I don't know what help looks like. I don't even know what help means, but if you could be with me now and help me. And then my mind kicked in and said, Laurie, God's not listening to you anymore. You know how many times you've lied to God? Every time you were in jail, every time you thought you were going to overdose, every time you thought you were going to be killed, you made some kind of cool deal with God. He always saved you. You never showed up for your part of the deal. He's not listening to you anymore. But I'm here to tell you there's nothing you can do to make God stop listening to you or loving you. That was January 6, 1987, the last time I ever used or drank. And it took me a while to get that, but I just kept on going. I got out of that detox. I didn't have any money, so I needed a free bed. There wasn't any. So I went back to the Trick's house for 3 weeks. He let me stay in his guest bedroom. And then I got to a women's recovery home. And for the first time in my life, I would start talking about the secrets in my life. And in that recovery home, they told me I needed to find a God or I wasn't going to make it. And that's why I chose this, because I thought, you know what, the real God was punishing me ever since I was a little girl. He hates me. So if I start praying to him, maybe he's lost me on the radar somewhere. Now I'm going to pray to him. My beacon's going to go on. He's going to go, there she is. And the shit's going to start again. I couldn't have that. So I didn't want to start praying to that guy. So they said I could believe in anything. So I started praying to, for those of you that are older, George Burns, because George Burns played God in a movie called Oh God. And I watched Oh God Book 2 when I was a kid. And he was so gentle with that little girl, and he smoked and he drank and he was chill. And I'm like, I could pray to George. And they were okay with that. They said, you just go ahead and pray to George. And God's grace is he didn't care who I was praying to as long as it wasn't me, right? So I stayed in that recovery home. I was supposed to be there 30 days, which sounded like a living hell with a bunch of women, like a group home. I ended up staying there a year because I quickly realized it was the safest place I'd ever been. During the time I was there, my mom tried to put my kid in foster care and actually succeeded with that. And I almost left, but I listened to her when she said, Laurie, get it right this time. Your daughter's 4 years old. Get it right and be her mom for the rest of her life. So I stayed a year. the foster mom that took her said she would give her back if I got a year of sobriety. So after a year of sobriety, I get my daughter back, and they told me at the rehab, you need to get a job. You need to get an honest job. No more of this prostitution stuff. You need to get a real job and be honest on your job application. Well, I didn't know how both of those were going to work. Be honest on the job application and get a real job. Like, I was a prostitute. I started at $200 an hour, worked myself down to $10 with group discounts. Will you give me a job? No, this wasn't going to work. So I lied. I said I knew computer systems. I didn't. As a matter of fact, my first job, I couldn't even find the power button. So easy to get the job, easy to lose the job. But I got a lot of jobs, and each one had new computer systems, and I got really good, and I started getting certified. I got out of my recovery home, and I moved him to this little place, and my daughter had like bunk beds in her room. And I got commitments everywhere. I was like a Narc in the Park secretary. I was secretary of H&I. I had a juvenile jail panel. Why did I have all this? Because I was scared of my brain. I was scared of myself. I was scared of my own limitations and staying sober without the whole support system at the recovery home. So, and then there was a men's group called Dog on the Roof. I didn't like them. They were very bossy. So I started a women's group at my house, a meeting, Pussy on the Porch, anti-Dog on the Roof, to piss off Dog on the Roof. And we met every week. We still meet every week. We were in the directory for a minute. They came over from the GSR and they said, Pussy on the Porch, not appropriate for the directory. And I explained to them the whole Dog on the Roof, and they said, no, it has to come out. So it's back in the directory, and in my area is POTP, and nobody knows what it means, but that's okay. Anyway, so at this meeting, one night, this girl shows up and she's like, my name's Pam and I'm an addict. I can't get sober like you guys did. A trick dropped me off at this meeting. My daughter's back at the crack house. How am I going to get sober with that? Like, I'm going to leave my daughter at a Samoan crack house. And I remember going into my bedroom and praying and talking to George and saying, do you think maybe I got a bunk bed in my kid's room, right? So I tell her after the meeting, I'll take your kid and I'll tell the guy that's bringing you here where you can get sober for almost nothing by where we live, right? So she drops her kid off and she goes to a sober living, and her kid's like my karma. I tell her to stay home. She tells me to F off. You know, it was just crazy. Like 2 months later, I haven't heard from her mom. And I loved this kid. It was like raising myself. So it was a real experience for me, but I immediately glommed onto her because I could see myself in her, right? 2 months later, I haven't heard from my mom. I call her mom. I call over there and they're like, that lady relapsed. She left here like 3 weeks ago. I'm like, no way, I've got a freaking daughter. And they're like, well, we don't do kids. We do sobriety. Call social services. So I called the local department and they're like, you need to drop her off. And I was so traumatized, like, how am I going to drop this kid off that I'm the only person she has right now? So I called, I have my Pussy on the Porch meeting list on my refrigerator. Remember, there's no cell phones in these days. And I found a girl that was a paralegal and she said, get guardianship now. And they can't take her. So I called that trick because I still have manipulation skills from the street. And I said, if you don't give me money for guardianship, which is $1,500, she's going to go into the system and be a foster kid. And you dropped her off here. So he came over and gave me some money. That's the last time I ever used my manipulation skills like that, but it worked. And they didn't take her. And when I went, they said, you need to apply to be a foster mom. You can't just be a guardian of her. So I went and applied to be a foster mom, and they pulled out my file and they're like, prostitution. And I'm like, I was hungry. We needed money. They're like, 4 times. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, you know, receiving stolen goods. There's no way you could be a foster mom. You need to bring that kid back, right? And through the whole thing of the guardianship and everything, I got to keep the kid. I can't even explain how that happened. But when that happened, the man said, if you come back in 7 years, with 7 years clean and sober, we can waive your record and make you a real foster mom, right? So the kid thing goes great until her mom dies of a drug overdose, right? Now, at that time I had a moment with God. Like, I was really angry at God. Like, how dare you say I could keep her and everything was going to be okay? And then she dies. And I realized that in the program, you know, there's always an aha moment where you realize why God did something. The problem is it's sometimes a long time away from the event and you really have to attach the two. But finally came a time when I realized that God left her with me because he knew her mom was going to die. That's the reason it was okay that I kept her, because I wasn't going to throw her away, right? So by the time she's 18, she's working in the computer company with me as my receptionist. And I realized that I may never be able to give my daughter a normal life. So I told my daughter, let's save half my paycheck every month for a year and let's buy a house, right? So she agrees because Shannon's 18, my daughter's still small. So we save half my paycheck. We go out to look for a brand new house, and we find this new home builder out in the county where we live, where you have to walk through the office to get to like model A, B, and C. And I am so obsessed with this house, but I'm so scared to tell my daughter that I don't know anything about buying a house, real estate, interest rates, nothing. So we go and see the house every weekend, but I'm not saying anything to the people in the office, right? And one day we walk in, there's balloons outside, and the lady says, Laurie, if you buy your house today, it's $10,000 off. I know you're scared. She knew my name because we've been coming through every weekend. She goes, go home, get your taxes, and I'm going to take a look at them, and I'm going to show you how to change around your taxes so your payment for your house and your dependents will be more, and blah, 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 and it'll work out. So I came home back with my taxes, and she shows me how to buy a house. I'm terrified. I'm signing paperwork for a 3-bedroom house. And now we're watching the house be built, and I'm just like, how does this happen from where I come from, right? We move into this brand new 3-bedroom house. The 3rd room's all decorated for a girl in case my daughter has a friend spend the night, because Shannon's already an adult now, right? So I keep on getting promoted at work, not because I'm the best systems engineer, because I'm so freaking happy to be alive. I think when you've lived in our kind of darkness and God shines his light on you, it's just so happy not to be grateful for every little stupid thing, a parking spot, a gum in my purse. Like, I still have a piece of gum, yay. You know what I mean? Like, anybody needs anything, a computer problem, I'm coming. So I went from systems engineer to senior systems engineer to director of IT services to owning the flipping company. And every time someone offered me something, I was crazy, like in turmoil, because I'm not used to that, right? And yeah, so one day my older sister calls me and she's like, Laurie, she never dealt with our abuse in our childhood. And she says, I've been beating my son, which is my nephew, Danny, so bad I might kill him. I need to bring him over there, and you need to call social services. So we do that, and I see social services driving away with my nephew. And my sister said, she started talking about the stuff my dad did to her when she was little that I just imagined by this point, that I thought I made up. It wasn't real. It was real, right? And then I see my nephew being taken away, and I was so pissed. I ran over to that social services and said, I need to apply to be his foster mom. And they said, Laurie, when we say 7 years, nobody ever comes back. Are you still sober? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, it's been just over 7 years. We're going to waive your record and make you a foster mom. It gives me chills right now. My little sister always says, is it odd or is it God? And it's got to be God, because I wasn't counting time. I didn't remember what they said. The minute they said no, that was all I heard. So my sister goes through some anger management program and gets my nephew back and never hits him again. But it's 2 days before Christmas, and I'm at my house. There's Christmas again for a Jewish person. I don't know why. But it's 2 days before Christmas, and the phone rings, and it's some lady, and she said, is this Laurie Burns? And I said, yes, it is. And she said, we've got you on a list as a foster mom, and we've got a 15-year-old girl that ran away from Vegas. She's got nowhere to go, and we're wondering if you still have an opening at your house. And I'm like, in my head, not out loud, I'm like, you've got me on a fucking list? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I could pick up any kid anytime? You've got a little girl over there? She said she's never had a mom. Her mom left at birth. And I'm like, I get to be this little girl's mom for Christmas, and I've got a brand new house with a brand new room that's never been slept in, all decorated for a girl. I couldn't get over there quick enough, and I'm standing on the other side of the door when I have a moment with God that it doesn't make sense that a person like me, like a juvenile delinquent, heroin addict, prostitute, could be chosen to be a foster mom. But I'm here to tell you, in this program, God does not make sense. He makes miracle after miracle after miracle. One day I walk outside of my house and there's for sale signs everywhere in the neighborhood. I have no idea why. So I asked my neighbor, Brian, where's everyone going? And he said, Laurie, our homes have appreciated. You take the money from the appreciation, you put it on a bigger house. I'm thinking, God, Brian doesn't know anything about me. Like, I came from the streets to this. This is my bigger house. My dream was to get the motel room without the hot plate that had the separate kitchen area. Now I've got a house. This is my dream house. There's no way. But I took direction like you guys taught me, and I got down on my knees and I talked to George and I said, George, I don't know what your will is, but if it sells within a month, I leave. Otherwise, I'm staying. 3 weeks later, my house sells for more than any other house. I go out to look for a little house to buy. I see this big home builder. I'm going to trip in and see how they're decorating so I can decorate my house nicely. When I walk in, the lady that taught me to buy a house is sitting there. Now, if you don't get God through this story, I don't know what to tell you, because I did not plan this. This was never my plan. Everyone always says, how did you do your life? And it's like, I just woke up and drank a lot of coffee, people. I just prayed, woke up, drank a lot of coffee, and said yes to everything that came to me that sounded good. And I walk into this new home builder, and the lady that taught me to buy houses, go home, get your taxes, bring them back, and let's see if we can buy another house. I buy a 5-bedroom house. I have no idea why. I'll tell you today, I have 43 kids, 14 grandsons, 12 granddaughters, and the most amazing freaking life. And I realize now, when I was a child and I thought God I must have been a witch in a past life, and that's why God hates me. I realize now that he loved me so much, that he blessed me for what I would be in this life, because it's the whole childhood, the whole, if you saw Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, why am I doing this? That gets me right here, right now, which is the most beautiful life. Have I run out of time yet? I don't know. I'm close, right? Okay, so last thing I want to share 2 more things, if they're okay. A couple of years ago, in 2007, I quit my tech job and I started a charity to rescue girls on the street. And that's a longer story, but today that's all I do. I have 126 beds for girls on the street. But a couple of years ago, when I started the charity, I called Tom, the guy in the wheelchair, and I said, Tom, you need to come by my charity house that I just built. And he said, Laurie, I'm not really into kids. And I said, yeah, I know, just meet me there. And he said, meet me at Starbucks. I'm like, no, meet me at the house and then we'll go to Starbucks, like 2 minutes, and then we'll leave. And he said, okay, but I'm not staying. I said, okay. So he pulls up to my first house that I ever built for little girls that were homeless and sex trafficked. And he rolls up in his wheelchair and he looks at the door, and next to the door, there's a plaque, and it's some Shakespearean quote about light after the rain. And on the top, it says the Fauntleroy House, and that's his last name. And he looks at me and he said, why is my name on this house? And I'm like, Tom, you saved my life. And he's like, Laurie, I gave you a fucking ride. I'm like, Tom, that you used to come and look for me on the street and tell me that maybe someday I could be something. And I never saw it, and I never believed it. That peanut of hope you had for me was enough to bridge me out of hell. You saved my life, Tom. And he looked like he was going to cry, so he popped a wheelie and he sped off to Starbucks to meet me. And this other thing I want to share is I was on a cruise ship with all my kids. I was speaking for Cocaine Anonymous. It was many years ago. And the phone went crazy when we docked, and I picked it up. At this time, I was running information technology at Northrop Grumman, so I thought maybe it's work. And it was a message from a hospital in Florida. It said, your father's in our custody, and there's been a serious incident. You need to call us immediately. So I called that number, and the man said, your father tried to take his own life, and he's kind of catatonic, but he keeps on saying he deserves to die, that he did bad things. And he said, if you want to talk to him, I'll put him on the phone with you. But he's in a bad place. And even though I was terrified, I got on the phone with my dad, and he said, how dare you? See, I've been writing letters to my dad for years. Through my own therapy, I realized maybe nobody ever loved my dad. And I realized what Gandhi said about be the change you want to see in the world. And I thought, if I could be love and grace for my dad like you guys were for me. So I've been writing letters to him, hoping to heal him, not hoping that he would try and kill himself. But he gets on the phone, he says, how dare you? How dare you love me? How dare you forgive me after what I've done to you? And I said, Dad, don't you realize that without you, I would never be right here, right now, which is the most beautiful life. I needed you to get me right here, right now. Nothing could have changed. I love you. I'm grateful. It was a long time ago. I forgive you. And he started crying, and the man got back on the phone and said, I can't release your dad unless you're going to take him into your custody. So I agreed to take my dad, because I read that story in the Bible about Joseph and that whole thing. And I thought about what Gandhi or Jesus would do. And I picked up my dad at Long Beach Airport, and he was still angry. And he was loading his suitcase into my car. And he said, you don't get it, do you? And I'm like, get what, Dad? And he said, your Grandma Anna, my mom, and she had already passed on. And I'm like, yeah, I love Grandma Anna. And he said, Grandma Anna was my foster mom. And you're taking in all these damn foster kids like me, and I don't deserve it. And I told my dad I loved him, and I called home and I said to the kids, Dad's going to be the oldest foster kid in the house tonight. He's going to sleep downstairs, we're going to sleep upstairs, and we're going to love him until he can love himself. And that's exactly what he did. And now my dad's all about helping all of the kids, even if we have to tell the story. So if you don't believe in God, know that he believes in you. And I don't care what you did, what you think you did that's so bad that he can't love you, because you're wrong. Because there's no way that I could be right here, right now, if that was even a little bit true. He loves us so much. And if you take what you have that you've been through that causes you pain and anguish and the darkest time of your life, and you take that thing and you share it with people that are in a darker place, it turns all of that stuff to gold. So thank you for letting me share.